YouTube.
All right, good morning, everyone. If you're on Zoom, if you'll mute your microphones. Welcome. Well, wait a second.
There we go.
Okay. All right, it's July 10th at 10:01. We're here for Lake County Schools LCEA bargaining session. Just want to welcome everyone. I know you guys set the agenda today. Like usual, we're kind of flexible. I know y'all might have a few topics that you branch off into, and if we have some things to bring up, we can. If you guys don't have anything to open with other than just welcome and introductions. Okay. We can go around the table. I know you guys have a lot of new faces on your bargaining team. So as we familiarize yourself, and we've got some additional guests with us today and some people that have changed positions. So we'll give our names and our updated positions also. So we'll start with Ms. Warner.
Station Warner, Principal, Tiberias Elementary.
Rob Feltner, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Leadership.
Good morning, Jamie Sidoric, Eastwood Middle School, proud principal.
Brent Frazier, proud principal of Umatilla High School, East Ridge.
Why are you touching my shoulder?
Haley Jo Rangel, Administrative Assistant to Deputy Superintendent Chad Farnsworth.
Chad Farnsworth, Deputy Superintendent.
And Guido Zamora, Assistant Superintendent HR.
Jessica Marshall, Admin Assistant to Mr. Zamora, Assistant Superintendent HR.
Ed Anderson, music teacher, Beverly Shores Elementary.
Kathy Smith, LCEA President. Elizabeth Emery, LCEA Vice President. Jessica Swinky, Umatilla High School Media Specialist. Al Smith, Regional Specialist for IBA.
Patrick Kelly, Leesburg High School.
Aaron Lucas, I'm SLP at Westerville Elementary.
Rebecca Sacco, SLP at Lake Hills.
CF Evans, IS, TK2 at Pine Ridge Elementary.
Chuck Wilson, I teach junior ROTC at Leesburg High School.
Liz Schlatter, Mount Dora High School, Literacy Coach.
And just for as we transition, Guido and I will continue to share these duties a little bit as we move through this contract, and then when we move into next year's contract, he'll fall into the chief negotiator position, and we'll move forward from there. See on the agenda, starting off with district counter proposals for Article 10 and 11. Just a second, we'll pass out those. I just want to state before this, for folks that are new to the table from my team and also for you guys' team, a lot of background in Article 10 and 11. Whether it be through normal bargaining seasons or full open book seasons. And planning has always been a hot topic, and as we transition through different visions and philosophies in the district and how we approach the instructional process, that has evolved. And also as we've tried to include some educator voice in some of the ongoings on campus, because there's a lot of talk of committee work and the Joint Leadership Committee, which I feel like for all intents and purposes, we have those things established well in concept and in contract, and how well that's translated out to the schools, I think it varies. So some of you might have experienced participation in some of those committees and some not at all. And our goal moving forward is to make sure, as I meet with principals as whole groups moving forward, that's on the front of their, as we talk about how frequently those are to gather and meet and what topics are, making sure they are aware as a group that needs to be a priority for them. But the overall goal for creating those committees was to allow, because we do vary so much on size of campus or grade levels, and now we've introduced K-8s and different communities and being part of different areas with different enrollments. That's why we created those frameworks, so there could be some independence at the schools and helping arrive at decisions and how things and processes and procedures occur at the school. So that was the overall goal of creating those. So as we look at some of those components of those committees in Article 10 and 11, I just want you to keep in mind that the goal was never to dictate from a contract what was supposed to be happening at those schools. The goal was to have a committee where people had a voice and could express themselves and have input on those processes and procedures. So we'll go ahead and pass out, you can pass out both Article 10 and 11 is fine. So kind of, it varies from time to time how we've done this in the past. Rather than get confusing of combining multiple proposals and striking what you guys suggested, basically, I went back to original language. If we accepted or agreed to what you guys had in your proposal, it's shown in there with a strike or underline. And then if there is some type of counter proposal or change language, it's signified the same way. So you guys, if it helps you, you'll have to compare your proposal compared to what we're counter proposing, but I'm going to step through each portion of it and provide some narrative along with each section. I feel like a lot of what was in contract, we spent a lot of hours and time on this contract, and there was a tremendous amount of strikes and underlines you guys provided. So you're going to see that there are some points we do agree with, and some points we suggest a tweak. But there's other parts where we're not prepared to totally make wholesale changes to, the work we've done in the past. And another caution as we go through these is I feel like there were some themes within some of what was being proposed that they were almost born out of maybe particular circumstances at certain schools. And we're not always, I don't feel like that's always wise to create language when around particular circumstances that should just be addressed at a school. If there's sufficient language that already addresses those issues in contract, they're just being misinterpreted, or somehow there's some type of disagreement on how that should be managed, or perhaps in some points it's just being ignored, or some groups are ignorant to what's in contract. I feel like if we do our jobs on both sides, as you guys representing the employees and we as helping, provide support and resources to the schools, that we can resolve a lot of those issues without creating a whole bunch of unnecessary contract language. So we'll start with Article 10, and under teaching supplies and materials, that's the first one that we did not accept the language that you guys had recommended, but it feels like that's something that we do need to hear where the concerns are and address those concerns. I can tell you there is no topic that my boss enjoys talking less about than copiers and printers. I think she spent the first 2 years of her life in this district talking about copiers and printers. And as I reached out to some principals and got some input on those things, what I put in my notes is, where are the problems, right? Because when I talk, like there was availability of teachers to be able to print, or they share a network printer, or there was access to things. And if there's limited access that are hindering teachers to be able to serve their students appropriate, we just need to know where those are. Because if I put things in language related to copiers and printers, and it's not a feasible or affordable solution, when you talk copiers and printers, that goes into a huge rabbit hole of issues, believe it or not. You think it'd be pretty simple. And then the other thing was having access outside of contracted work hours. To me, that didn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you're outside of your work day and contracted work hours, I can't put something in contract that would go against something that risk management would have issues with. As we put something in contract that gives access to something, when people are not supposed to be necessarily physically where they are located at the moment. And I'm not dumb. I mean, we all know, right? There's teachers that want to be in their classrooms way outside of hours, but and I know they want to spend time, whether it's setting up or additional evenings or whatever they're doing to get their jobs done the best they see fit for their students. I know these things occur, but I can't put in contract that we're going to do anything that provides for outside of contracted time. So do you guys have any feedback? And I know you've got a lot of feedback. I think I see it on the agenda. You want to share some things later. So if it's something you want to talk about later, that's fine. But as we move through, if you want to share something.
Yes, the only thing I would address for sure is the copies printers. Yes, they're available, but if, for example, they're in an MTSS meeting and they need all of a sudden 5 more copies because of whatever reason, they can't hurry up and get those copies, and it doesn't fit because it's way in the front building instead of like within a pod area or whatever. Since we went to the we've gone to the like 2 or 3 printers at a facility. They're not as convenient for a teacher to make sure that she has a copy of something. That's one thing. And I will say another thing is we do still have, from what we hear, a few schools that administrators may conveniently say all the time, you know, like watch your printing, you know, that type idea. And so they get like, you know, can I make copies? Can I not make copies? Are we supposed to make copies? Are we? So they're still kind of hearing that, whether it be true or not, they're still hearing. It's kind of like they'll take the day off unless you really need it because we have, you know, we don't have much sub money left. It's kind of that same kind of idea. And so it's hard when you see that, plus the fact that they're always wanting to watch how many they make, as in a split class. If I gotta make 5 more copies, that's 5 more copies for everything I do. And of course, teachers have limits. And I know that Diana said before that, you know, if you need copies, let me know, that type of idea. But the administrators still say they have limits, whether it's, you know, 500 copies, 1,000 copies, whatever it is. There's limits, and if they go over that, then it's like, oh my gosh, and you went over your copies. Well, unfortunately, a classroom teacher, if they get 1,000 copies, maybe an elective teacher or guidance counselor, they don't need that many copies. So it kind of somewhat washes each other out in that episode. A lot of times, I mean, I remember even when I was still in the classroom, I made a lot more copies for emergency subplans and substitute. Because if I had a substitute there, it's much easier for them to pass out something. So I would make a lot more copies if I wasn't there, versus if I'm there and I know what's going on and I know what's there. And so that sometimes creates a little extra thing too then for someone. And if they're trying to, you know, it's at the end of the 9 weeks and they've already exceeded their copies, but I know I'm gonna be out 2 days from now, what am I supposed to do about getting those extra copies? Hopefully they would ask. Hopefully they would get it. Not necessarily they are. But those are some examples anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think there's got to be some communication, right? That if you are seeing this at a handful of schools, we need to know where their schools are at, and we can look at what the thresholds are and what the limits are. The limit, I mean, essentially, every copy has a dollar sign hooked to it, right? So you can't do away with a limit, because at the end of the day, there's a budget. So I think that's probably why you hear, and I see it, right? I know some teachers need more or less than others. Also know where you wish some would make more than they do, because they might not be providing all the resources. But then you've got some that just blow it wide open, and it's probably reaches the level of somewhat abuse of what's available. So I think it's really just having that communication, and we know where those work sites are. We can definitely attend to it. And just as you said, you know, Ms. Corny wants people to have the copies that they need. So we need to continue on that. We need to know where those issues are at. And if there's things like MTSS meetings and stuff like that going on, I think some planning on the front end, and when, you know, you're gonna probably hear a consistent theme that I'm gonna take a lot of what that are legitimate concerns, very valid from you guys, are gonna be conveyed to the principals directly face to face prior to school starting. So this is the first one of those on the faculty areas, and anywhere that you guys recommended within its ability, I did not accept those. Those things were put in place for a reason. And I think it's almost too insulting to you guys for us to create language that we can't cover all circumstances and instances that occur. So I know your desire is to become more concrete in the language and for it not to be so mushy, but at the same time, we know there's different circumstances that are going to occur, and whether it's a facilities issue or whether it's a growth issue or some type of problem. But the idea is, again, to hear where those issues are at and help us resolve them. Because everybody should have a lunch area and restroom facilities and parking areas and things that they need. But if we have issues to where, you know, some of our schools are busting at the seams, I can't promise you that, you know, there's going to be an exclusive parking area for employees. I know some of our employees are divided amongst different lots at different schools, depending on where you're at. So I just hope you can, you know, try to not get frustrated when you see that within its ability, because it's a true statement. We're going to do the best we can to make sure that the needs are met on some of these topics. On section 5, the telephones, electronic devices, and classroom interruptions. I think the big thing is I think there's some competing issues in some of that. We're not willing to take out that, you know, people aren't supposed to be on communication devices when they're not supposed to be. I have, just as you guys probably hear about, you know, different things from administrators and how they conduct themselves, you know, we see the same thing with teachers and other employees also, and it comes to fruition with the students most of the time. But we have teachers that spend a tremendous amount of instructional time on their phones, and it's probably just a few, right? And those are things that administrators need to address and handle appropriately. But I do understand that there needs to be some clarification, especially how we've moved forward with Centegix and our devices that have ability to alert. Because in the past, when we started off down this road following Marjorie Stoneman, that, you know, there were apps on phones, and we quickly found out it's not reasonable. You know, what you do with that fellow's got a flip phone, right? So, or doesn't have a phone, or doesn't feel secure in their privacy using their personal phones. Totally understand that. So we did include that administration is prohibited from requiring teachers to possess or utilize personal electronic communication devices, which was part of the well, I reword a little bit. Administration may not require teachers to possess or utilize electronic communication devices. So, and again, that's one of those things where I imagine there's been some dust ups over phones at some point or another. If a teacher's being told they must use their personal cell phone, we shouldn't even know, because we would have language to protect from that. Section 8, I don't feel like what was proposed in section 8 is realistic. I feel like that we're in competition with the rest of the world for students and parents and families to participate in our schools. And if we're limiting absolute times when we're willing to meet with folks and work through issues, then we're gonna have more problems. I think we've got to make sure that our administrators are managing those well and not putting too much burden, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Because at the end of the day, you know, the students and the kids can't control the decisions of the adults and how they're managing things, and we don't want the kid at the end of that to suffer. So we rejected the Section 8 language as something we're not accepting at this time. Because overall it'll hinder the function of the school and service to students in the community. And the same kind of goes as you move down until we get to money collection on Section 10. We did accept that language of any teacher required to collect money and manage funds will receive training and support with district money and handling policies and policies each school year during the pre-planning period. Any new hire after pre-planning will be oriented to money handling policies within 10 days of being hired. Teachers who manage internal accounts will be provided with copies of quarterly reports and account balances upon or as requested. I think that's a great suggestion. We've got more and more, just like we have, you know, turnover in teachers that possibly take on, you know, large clubs or teams or things of that nature. We've also got a lot of new bookkeepers, but we've created some strength and stability in the finance department to provide training out to those bookkeepers. And we want to continue with that reach on the training from possibly bookkeepers and whether it be assistant principals or principals in pre-planning, making sure that they nail down, you know, what the expectations are with handling money. Because you know, money's a good thing and provides, you know, it happens to me too, don't worry. So definitely great idea, definitely see a need for it. And it'll only enhance what we've got going on at the schools and reduce some of the mishaps that occur where they, you know, cause hardships at the school or move up into the district to have to be handled. So that's something we were able to agree. The Section 11, the notification, notifying people of their teaching assignments. I feel like we've already got some deadlines built in. And again, it comes down to some variety and some things that work for the function of the school. And we're not gonna, we have to have some management rights to be able to make those assignments but also the flexibility when things change. I know you guys suggested making a change on when it's a change in student enrollment, but that's not the only circumstances that occur that might impact what's best for kids. So we're not willing to relinquish the ability to notify people under the current language and circumstances. And also, I don't think we see it necessary that, I mean, there's times where people are going to have to go out of field in order, you know, whether it be allocations, whether it be what works best for kids. And I get it, it's stress upon the teacher when they have to change their role. Big difference between going from K to 5, right? And so we usually around that season, quite honestly, we usually hear 1 or 2 teachers reach out to us, and we work. I work directly with the principals a lot of times to hear their justification of what those moves are. And there's been times where they're like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to the drawing board on this, and we're gonna figure out a different way to keep this person in the same spot. And then there's other times where I fully understand, look, it's, at the end of the day, this is just best for kids. When I look at the skill set of the adults I have on my campus, this is what we need for kids. The Section 12 on the teacher plan days, we did not accept that language, and we're just not going to dictate pre-planning and contract language any further extent from what it is. I mean, I feel like, there's a lot to get done in pre-planning and post-planning. And each year those demands increase, whether it's mandatory training for safety from the state or whether it's something new that becomes necessary for a particular school. I think we need to keep that flexibility from school to school and allow that ability for things to occur at the school that might not be necessary for another school. But that feeds back into, there is some feedback opportunities within as long as they're occurring like they're supposed to and by contract in those joint leadership committee meetings. So a lot of these things that you guys are asking for could flush out and have a voice in those committees and not necessarily be dictated in contract how every single school is going to do a certain way and fit into a certain box.
I will just say that on that, when you're talking about the joint leadership, we hear a lot of, come back with the fact that administrators, well, we don't meet for that. We don't meet for that. They've had a lot of, and a lot of it would be actually in the spring, in April and May, a lot of it, because you're making schedules, you're doing this, you're doing that. We started asking our people in the spring, well, are you meeting with your administrators to go over some of these things? And everybody we asked, no, we're not meeting. No, they're just making it. And then a couple other of them said, well, they said they meet with me when it was all done. So it was like, well, when it's all done, how are you gonna make any changes when it's all done and you think that this is the way it needs to be? That's not a joint leadership, and that's not something that can be discussed afterwards. We know that we had it in as leadership before. Well, now they just don't call it a leadership team, they call it something else. Whatever you call it doesn't make any difference. If you are talking about these things, administrators need to realize that someone needs to be there. Whether it's the rep, whether it's just a representative of, okay, you're on, you're a member, somebody needs to be there to make sure that that equitability is there. Because we know that there are some that are not. We still have things that are not equitable. And it is, that's one reason why this was in here, to try to make, and I know you talked about the joint leadership. But again, things are made and they're not included at all. So putting it out.
Well, and I agree. And I think as we step through in Article 11, looking at those roles and responsibilities in the joint leadership, I think if we uphold what's currently in there, then we're not going to have as many issues like that. And I think that's important, right? Like even as simple as clarifying the quarterly language when they're supposed to meet, which we'll talk about. I think that way, I think that quarterly meet is imperative, right? Because it's that meeting that probably needs to occur at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That's when they're going to start considering those master schedules. That's when because I think there is a lot of intercommunication that goes into the school, and probably what weighs on the protecting teacher time is important to the administrators, because I mean, it flushes out for better results for everybody in the end. So meeting to meet on things that there's at times, a lot of times unavoidable, no matter what people's opinions are. I get it. You want people to feel heard, but at the end of the day, if it's slowing down the efficiency of what we need to do to provide what we need to for kids, then that I get where things get moving really fast. And we know just like we're supposed to make, a year's worth of gain in 180 days, right? So it's these strange things where we're trying to put, 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. So, a lot of this will flush out when we talk about 11 a little more in depth, hopefully. But observation of classrooms did not accept this language. I don't know where that's occurring, and I don't want to put something in the contract that releases some type of negative connotation, like we're trying to record teachers and we've got these strange issues where we're bringing in media and recording devices to record teachers in some awkward situation. So my question was where is that happening? Help me understand a little bit better on people coming in and reporting teachers. What I encourage, even administrative, because I think you guys have seen when recording across any employee level is, we take extremely seriously. By the end of the day, I've advised all the way up and down and side to side to teachers, staff, administrators, assume you're always being recorded, because guess what? You're not, as much as we try to control those students and their cell phones. I mean, heck, they got cameras built in glasses at this point, right? So you gotta assume you're always being recorded. But I mean, are y'all having problems with administrators coming in and recording teachers without their permission?
Not a lot, but we have had, and that's why this was in here, because it was suggested to do this, because then they would know. Say a handful of people, but it's, and they felt very uncomfortable in the fact that it was being done and they were asked. But again, they didn't want anything brought to the attention, which is usually what happens. It's like we asked them, well, can we contact the administrator, or can we contact, chat, what do we do? They're like, oh no, I don't want anybody else to know about it. I said, what would you like me to do then? So this is why some of this stuff is so difficult, because of that, because they don't want that, I'm gonna say it, they don't want the retaliation. Because they're afraid that anything that they say against an administrator would be retaliated against them. Whether it be something just in, something in passing, all the way up to, yes, you're not being reappointed. Because we know that it does happen, and so that's always in the back of their mind, unfortunately.
So I still need some specificity. You don't have to tell me where the schools are at out in this open meeting, but we need to know where that's occurring. Is it for punitive purposes? Is it for sharing best practices with other teachers? Is it, I mean, what are the circumstances?
And I know for fact in one instance for sure, they have no idea. I mean, they're hoping it's for best practices. But again, they were told they were being, and I would hope that if, for a fact, someone is doing, well, I really like this lesson, can I start recording it because you're really doing a wonderful job? That type of idea. That's the case, I mean, the teacher can say yes or no. I mean, that would be their, and I would hope that yes, if it was that well of a lesson and that good, okay, great. I'll record it and I'll do fine. Again, it's difficult when they don't know that they're being recorded. And I remember myself, you're thinking that, the administrators on their laptop, because they're doing the evaluation and they're sitting here, but yet then they're also on their phone doing something. And it's like, oh, what are they doing on their phone? Or are they texting and doing something else, or are they doing something else? So it's always in the back of your mind that there's, and you would hope that it's not happening. But in these few cases that we know of, yes, they, I guess, found out somehow later that they were actually being recorded, and they felt like that should not have happened without them knowing.
And it should not, right? But that's one of the things I feel like we need to deal with, those few cases. And, it's, I get it. It's going to take it's going to take courage for that to occur, but it's just like creating more language for language you feel like it's probably not being followed anyway. It's probably not making effective change regardless of what's actually happening at the school. So this contract getting thicker and thicker doesn't necessarily improve the work experience at the school. It's going to boil down to communication, them being courageous enough to come forward, and you guys providing that proper support. Because what I would encourage is them to channel through you guys. Right. And then that allows us to strategically buffer the situation and allows whoever it may be, myself or a designee, to help them understand that we better not sense any form of retaliation if necessary to make that clear to someone. And I feel like when I know what a majority of times happening when they're in that classroom and that phone's and they're answering that phone. chances are they're answering a need from another teacher somewhere else on the campus, right? Or they're responding to some type of crisis or what somebody is deemed to be a crisis up in the front office, or the interesting brand of parents we have approaching the schools these days. So.
Another question, somebody just asked me, the recording / photos, what? I don't want to say this. I want to do this question, but yet I want to say that within social media and the things that happen nowadays, because everything's out there and everything's there, but maybe they want to just point out an issue or point out something. But we've also had teachers that have had someone has come into the room when they're not there and they took pictures and then it was put out. Whether it be within the school or social media or whatever. So those are things that have also happened.
Okay.
Just letting you know.
Okay.
And so that's another reason why this was brought to our attention and.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, a teacher's classroom is an extension of themselves, right? So they need to provide the same courtesy for the individual as they do the domain they spend most of their waking life in. So that's what I'll be conveying to our principals is let's get some permissions from people before those things occur. And I know we've got some schools that, man, they are Facebook wild, but and their intent is to market their schools, right? But at the same time, let's make sure everybody's okay with being part of that marketing process. I mean, I know every time most people, when somebody takes a picture of them, they're like, let me see that. And they're not looking at the group. Let me see what I look like. Right. So I'll definitely mention that then to make sure that, look, I get it. You can market your school, but let's make sure people are on board for that. Down on 16, final grades reporting.
They have that on there,
That's
but we don't have it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not material. So on final grade reporting, teacher will not be required to finalize and post grades before the end of the marking period grading window. I feel like that's redundant. There's a deadline right above that, right? That says that that the reporting of final grades for the last quarter marking period will be due by the end of post planning. So that sets that deadline of when grades are due. I know you had mentioned, like, I think I have to imagine this gets into like maybe with some issues with seniors who graduate early or some type of weird caveats that go on. And I want to make sure we're being reasonable at the schools on the expectations of teachers. But at the end of the day, if they're doing things that are against that paragraph that's in place already, we need to handle that.
It's actually kind of in all levels because they're trying to make sure that with the kids that are maybe lower, they're trying to get them to pass, they're trying to get them to everything. Plus the fact that an administrator will say, well, you need to teach all the way up to the last day. Well, how can you teach all the way up to the last day and then still have a grade that's ready even a week beforehand? And some of these are not necessarily seniors. These are ones that are, again, they're just trying to make sure that they pass. Or even we see in some of the other grading periods, the same sort of idea in the fact that, well, if you do this, you can do this. So if you have grades done beforehand, you can, Bugman comes. Things like that, work from home, whatever. So we see these things, but yet the grades are not due until, as you say, it's in here. The grades are due. But yet an administrator is telling them that, well, you could do this if you do this, which again is not in contract and it's not there and it's not saying those things. So therefore, lack of a better word, they're getting pressured, voluntold, whatever you want to call it at that point, that, well, you can do this, but do this. So, and it's again, it's a few schools, it's a few things. I understand the senior idea because they do early, they do things, they do all that. I understand that. And I think most teachers understand that too, because they know that that's an important thing, because as seniors, you have to know whether they're graduating or not. Other levels necessarily, they still have some time that they could get things done, even up to the post-plan day.
Mhm.
So that's where it's kind of getting into, kind of some.
Well, and I agree. I mean, in a world where we're trying to get folks on board for redos and retakes and allow kids to eventually get to that mastery, right? We don't need to be talking out of both sides of our mouth. So I just think that we got to uphold the language, and that's the challenge that you guys face and we face. If they'll just let us know and have that courage to let us know that they're being pressured into, doing something earlier than what's outlined in contract, we just have to know about it. So and then also it feels like, we're trying to get as much done with these kids in 180 days. And it feels like, we're the amount of days that lead up to breaks and things like that, it keeps growing backwards into the different semesters and grading periods.
Like you said, the redo is fine. Well, if you're doing a redo and the redo is, the day before Christmas break or whatever break it is that you want to call it, and the last day that's there, how can a teacher be expected to grade it and have everything all done that very next day in order to take off the following day? But yet that whole day, even if that teacher, for example, was working at home and you're finalizing all of your grades to the teacher's contract, it says that you have until X day to get that done. But administrator is saying no, in order to, go home for your whatever break it is and whatever, you have to have all of your grades in.
And I think because that sounds like something that will blanket over a school, right? And I think that what we can't wait for is that to flush out in the survey. That needs to be something that you guys, members at the schools, feel comfortable sharing with you. And you can't retaliate really against the whole school if it's impacting more than one person or just one person. But if we can at least know where the school is at and see what kind of remedies we can come up with, because it might be one of those no good deed goes unpunished type things, right? Where they're like, hey, you get your stuff in a couple days early, that's going to free you up for that teacher work day. I'm willing to let y'all do virtual on the work day if that's what occurs. I can't see a whole lot of reasoning for evil why that will be occurring, but it just needs to be consistent amongst people on the campus, and we need to follow our current contract language. The next is on the section 18 on the teacher of the year program. Definitely agree. If there's not someone available to participate in that process, it's pretty much dictated by the Education Foundation, but they want things to make sense also. So it's just a matter of, a lot of times when I see, like, whether it's a leadership committee meeting or something that does require a contract for you guys to have representation there, a lot of times our folks don't know who their building reps are. And I know there's been times where you guys have struggled to get somebody to take on the role because teachers are so busy. And so I would just, encourage to, if you guys know where there's not a rep, just keep that active communication, which I know you do a lot of times with that particular school, to make sure that they're represented well in that process or any other. This gets into the next is substitutes. It's not that I totally reject the notion. There's more work to be done in this area, because when you start crunching the numbers and looking at things, we can't create a process to where the money we have budgeted for subs is outweighing what we're putting out for teachers where they're covering 1 to 3 or 11 plus or a whole class or absorbing. But because all of this is fueled by attendance, and it becomes not realistic or affordable whenever I have, let's say, roundabout that compression teachers that's at 48.5 at whatever it is, $33 an hour, right? If all of a sudden you've got a teacher that's agreed to absorb their colleagues' classes, and you've got 3 or 4 of them, and it becomes multiple days, I mean, you're getting above that number that's budgeted for a sub pretty quickly. And some of our absences come in chunks these days. So it gets a little unaffordable quick. So I'm not sure. So I'm still looking at that. We're still trying to look at, the number of absences we have and our sub fill rates, and we did agree with SEIU yesterday to be able to continue to use their folks to sub. And my goal is to relieve the pressure off of you guys, people having to cover classes. But I don't know if it's some type of reduced rate to cover on planning or something, but I have to keep it within a budgeted window. It's not that I don't think, I haven't wrapped my arms around how to afford that yet. So it's not something that I'm totally abandoning. It's just something I think we've got some more work to do through this process. And
Just to clarify this, the hourly rate for this is basically one thing like this one time. It's not like each hour that they would be paid. The hourly rate.
but once you divide that
I mean, I understand.
amongst the people, it starts to come up. So, well, we're gonna look at it. We're just not, because I saw it. It's been our issue, right? The absorbing of kids is the really hard part. Yeah.
It's hard, and one reason why it was brought up this way is because we've seen it in other district contracts, that they get paid for it, number one. 2 is also the fact that if Kathy always says yes, that I'm willing to take these kids. But then come the work day, everybody gets off. Then I didn't get any compensation time for that being off because everybody got off. And so that's where it comes in. Same thing with if Kathy takes time and, okay, this Wednesday, I feel like I'm gonna take time and I'm gonna leave on this Wednesday. Well, then all of a sudden there's a meeting that comes up on Wednesday, so I need to be at that meeting. So therefore I can't use that day either. So it just comes a very, very hardship to be able to actually be compensated for those times. Unless you would do something like we know Leesburg High School does something. They have the passes, they have those things that they've kind of created within their school, which is fine. And it works for them.
Kind of
but
fine.
Well, I mean, but it works for them. I mean, to a degree, yes, everything's not gonna work fantastically all the time. But it's just hard to have that compensation for this.
I agree. It's a tough issue. The one thing that's plaguing our district, quite honestly, or one of the primary things that's plaguing our district getting to that next level in student achievement is attendance. That's both adults and kids, right? So I think that's something we've got to take on, just as a district as a whole. How do we meet that challenge? Because we are maximizing our ability to bring subs into this district. It stays on the forefront. I won't make y'all suffer through all that again. I've explained a lot of times before, but then it has to move to, okay, how do we make sure the people that are, because I've looked at attendance incentives and things, and what happens is that's great. You wind up rewarding the people that have good attendance, and the people that still aren't showing up that have bad attendance. You about can't put a price tag on it. So it's like they didn't care to begin with. So especially then they get unpaid leave, and you see that they're still missing the amount of days. But our attendance data is just, it's pretty horrendous. So I feel like I'm fighting a problem in several different directions. But at the end of the day, I do know that people are losing their planning time because of it, and we've got to figure out how we can afford to compensate that in one way or not. The teacher aid thing, I didn't. So I needed a little help from that. I reached out and talked to a couple of principals. So I think teachers' aides a lot of times occur maybe in self-contained classrooms. I need some help where y'all are seeing teachers' aides. I know y'all were just, it was just a to the extent possible. But because when I said, okay, well, is that possible? And one of the principals I talked to is a lot of times we're building schedules for kids and we got parents calling us and we're trying to work out where they can fit or not fit and what credits they need or don't need. Where, and while we're not going to stick any kid in a teacher's classroom where there's just an absolute conflict and, they're in total objection to it. Where are y'all seeing? Do y'all hear anything about teachers' aides?
There have been some teachers that have, voiced concerns with the teacher assistants with the fact that they weren't asked like who would be in a classroom, like a self-contained, for example. Or even if it's a new one, like to be in on like the interview process, if at all possible, or things like that to where, because if they're gonna be, especially in, for example, self-contained room, I mean, they need to be able to be a little bit compatible. And sometimes if they're not, then that could be and could create an issue.
I think that's where some of the confusion comes. I think this is some old language, right? Because we have teacher assistants that are in self-contained classrooms. And when I was talking through it with some principals, they're like, well, we have teachers' aides that are student like helpers that are coming in, and there's a course code that they can use. High school, am I correct in that? There's a course code that they use to be a teacher's aide in a classroom.
Yes.
So I think this is what that language actually was. And because we've never had a job description for a teacher's aide, right? Or this is extremely old.
I have a feeling it's extremely old because we
Okay.
either call them teachers aid, we call them
Okay.
assistants. I have a feeling this is supposed to be a teacher assistant.
Okay.
Because really a teacher's aide, like a student, I don't even know if they even, maybe I can ask. But do the secretaries, administrators, do they just automatically just take the kids? Or do they ask, like, for example, media specialists?
Yes.
And, whatever, if you need one or want one or whatever, that type idea, I would think that you would, just like you would an assistant. But I think this is supposed to be for teacher assistants, and it's just that
Okay.
old of language.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but it's been in here since I've been doing bargaining, which has been, I don't know, 15 years, I think. So it's way before I was even,
Okay.
I've been in bargaining a long time.
So we got one way or another, we got to provide some clarification on that, because the principal was that I talked to, was a little taken back, like, we've never really had any problems with that. They like the kids come in and help out, or, it's almost like a best buddy type situation or something. But this, I think, I know it doesn't, because I do have conversations on the adult front of that, right? Where you've got, teachers' assistants have become almost as scarce as finding teachers, and especially that are ready and willing to go into those self-contained classrooms. And just so you guys know, we're not signed yet, but we have some verbal agreement that's gonna benefit those classrooms, which provides some pay grade changes for teachers' assistants that are willing to take on the responsibility of self-contained classrooms. So automatically, when you're assigned to those classrooms, you're going to get a couple pay grade bump to go in there. So the goal is that some of the higher quality folks that are willing to take that charge and those significant duties are compensated a little better. So hopefully we'll see a little more of that. But I think this year, probably more than any before, we had some headbutting going on a little bit, right? But usually they sense it pretty quick and shuffle the deck on the teacher assistants when we have some incompatible folks. because at the end of the day, the teacher's in charge of the classroom, right? But sometimes the level of teacher aid they need or teacher assistant that they need in those classrooms, they don't have a lot of great options. So we'll look at that and see. And I think we just need to update that when it's all said and done in this negotiation. The Workplace Safety Committee, so I'm trying to get some update on that. Because when I talk to school safety and security, they're like, not a thing for us. These are committees that used to occur on the campuses pretty frequently. So I think it's more of a risk management type issue. But I'm not sure that these are even going on a whole lot anymore. And it's probably pretty scarce. So I'm going to talk to Mr. Oyer, who's over risk management, and kind of see is this language obsolete, or do we need to, are there still statutory requirements for this? Because if we're not meeting those, we need to make sure that we are meeting those. Because I think it's just all kind of evolved through the different safety and security and different things that have occurred through the years. I do agree that somewhere in this, we need communication trees, which y'all have recommended. So, and a lot of times I think that occurs at the schools by nature, that there are communication trees and how to get a hold of people and different things. But we just need we can put that uniform somewhere, or just make it a requirement through school safety and security that those are available. So I mentioned that to Mr. Mabry and said, look, as you roll things out for this coming year, can we make this part of your stuff, that they're updated communication trees? Because I mean, even if it's down to what do you call it? Not relocation, reunification efforts, those things are going to be necessary. So I'll check on that and see what we need to do with that, and how that relates still to, because we had whoever that representative was supposed to be on joint leadership committees also. So, but I have a feeling this is going to be a risk management thing. So I'll talk to them and get some clarification on that.
And maybe this is just a question like we're here too, that like if a classroom or a school or you know, both, I mean, if something happens that they're wanting to figure out if, you know, why are there a bunch of bugs in my room? You know, why are there what looks like mold in my room, or whatever the situation is. So in that sense, I'm thinking that would be more like this, like a work safety thing, and the fact that, okay, is it only one room, or is it like a whole building, or is it the whole school, or is it, so those are things that I would think that should be, or is it actually then a risk management, that the fact that even if it's only one room, and I know that there's a lot of issues that come up in August all the time, because, and I understand why, that we don't have the air on, but it creates issues then when the teachers come back in August with their rooms, that they may think that it's, you know, it's too dirty now, or it's moldy, or it's whatever, because they haven't had that air on, or it smells that musty smell, or it, whatever. And then they go to their administrator or go to somebody and they're saying, oh, no, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that, you know, I mean, it's like, and again, and maybe it's one of those things that at least to check on it, if nothing else. I mean, I don't know, it's to have that security of the person knowing that, no, I know it's not anything that is contagious or gonna make me sick, in other words. And that's why if you go in certain places, you see the filtration systems that teachers have bought themselves, because I wanna make sure that it's, you know, that my room is healthy and I'm healthy. So, and they're not seeing that from the other side.
Well, I think I can tell you, and that'll be part of my new life, right, and maintenance, but I think it is a risk management thing. and making sure that those things are reported. We've kind of moved past the days of, oh, everybody's out for summer, shut the AC off. You can't get away with that anymore. It just doesn't work because the humidity gets too thick. So you'll see, we run ACs, but they're all on schedules, right? They've always been on schedules. A lot of times it's due to failure. We'll have, just like you guys know, where's your car, or your house, seems like your AC doesn't break until summer. And we do see those things where failure occurs. We had some issues from year in, year out where people are reporting what they suspect to be indoor air quality issues. So we do testing on that. Our folks in risk management, they're watchdogs, and they get after it pretty good. You can talk to the principals. They they love to see them coming, but it's whether it's mismanagement of chemical storage, whether it's leaks that have been persistent and not addressed, whether it's whatever the case may be. We got to stay on top of those things, and I would just encourage them to notify their building administrators. And if all else fails, there's anonymous tip lines that can come in through the website and say, hey, I've got this issue in my school, and it can come in that way. But one way or another, at the end of the day, it's the little guys we got to worry about too, right? We don't want anybody exposed to anything that's hazardous. So.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, there's a lot of things that, I mean, I know even when it's hot outside in Arizona, your own glass gets messed up. And I mean, we see it all the time, but yet it's a little bit different when the kids come in and then you're like, oh, it kind of smells in here.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we probably, more than any other state, maybe Louisiana competes with us, or Mississippi, but we're more human than anywhere, so we face a lot more of those challenges. Right. And you all know, you can walk outside even in a moldy room and probably take in more mold spores when you walk outside in Florida. It's just so. And
right.
And we do see people that have respiratory issues, and that gets into other things that we channel that hardcore through workman's comp. We make sure that we support them from a health screening standpoint and or air quality, so they get elbows deep in it on a regular basis. Okay. So Article 11. So definitely the clarification is necessary on the meet a minimum of once a quarter and during the school year. And that's going to be on the top of my points to our administrators when we meet with them very soon, to make sure that they know that this joint leadership committee is not an option, that it's a requirement by contract. So I tailored a little bit of the language that we were okay with in the bottom part of that first paragraph. So basically, the first sentence I made some adjustment in, that the duties of the Joint Leadership Committee are to assist in the development or modification of policies and procedures, to ensure input from instructional personnel is considered in the decisions of site-based administration. Items to be discussed in the Joint Leadership Committee include but are not limited to. I mean, I think there's just the committee's not actually modifying or changing the procedures themselves. And at several different areas, I've got a discomfort with equitability and equitable. I feel like that word's become a little like Jell-O, nailing it down for what's reality of what's equitable for one school to the next, or from one person to the next based on the responsibilities and what they're charged in a way to serve the kids. I don't want to put something in that's impossible in some areas. But this does provide that the intent of the leadership committee. It reiterates and also ensures that there is some input in making those decisions. Because I can tell you, when the processes and procedures break down that come about on whether it's emergency supervision, all these different things, at the end of the day, it's going to be the principal that's held accountable. So they have to maintain the ultimate authority to make those changes and decisions, but they need to do it in an informed way. And like I mentioned earlier, the idea is to not dictate from a contract standpoint what's supposed to happen as a result of these committees, but provide the structure and ability for them to occur. So that's where on the extra student supervision, that's taken out. I mean, I hear frequently, as far as what you guys recommended, and the rotations are going to look different. There's different demands for different schools and different levels, right? You know, I think of like somebody like Sid, who's got 3-story balconies and a different size school and middle schoolers to boot, right? His needs are going to be a little different than say Stacia, that's got blind spots and stairwells and different things that go on. So I think that supervision is going to be, you know, and then you pile in ever-changing demographics and enrollment sizes to where keeping eyeballs on all the kids and making sure and how frequently you have to do that. I mean, you might have a school like Rhymes where, man, you rotate it and you might be on for 9 weeks and you never see that duty again. But then you get into some of these larger schools and even, Lord, Leesburg High School. I mean, that's like a high school I went to school with where heck, it's so spread out and disjointed and old and looks different. You can't accept for people to only have to be on a rotation once and for it to be, at the end of the day, equity can't be guaranteed, just to meet the variances at the different campuses. Start and end times. So you guys made recommendations on that. And I feel like that is something that needs to be outlined, what you guys have recommended, of course. You know, we got to keep in mind there's some wonky legislation out there and that statute overrides, you know, contract language and board policy. But the specific workday start and end times may vary by work site, but they will be consistent for all instructional staff at the same work site, except by consent of the instructional staff impacted. So a little bit with that. So do you guys see that there's instructional staff within one school that have different start times during the day?
Yeah, due to duties. If you're on duty, you come in at this time. If you're not on duty, you come in this time. And it's like, and that's, I guess it's just been happening for a long time. And there were a couple teachers that were, I mean, the ones that have been there a while, they're used to it, they know it, they do it, you know. Well, then somebody came on and they're like, well, no, I had nothing, you know, I don't know about this, and it was just, it's just like a given, and it's just. It happens because you're on duty this 9 weeks or however, whatever it is, and so you come in 15 minutes early, and now you can leave the 15 minutes early at the end of the day too, but. And so the times are the same, it's just the fact that you're entering earlier and leaving earlier. Because you have this duty for whatever weeks it is,
And
for
that-
example.
That's beyond people that are receiving an additional paid supplement for beginning and
Yes.
into school.
Yes.
I also remember one comment that I think was where guidance counselor with high school.
Yeah.
But so instead of starting at 7:10, that principal wanted the guidance counselor to start at 8, when everyone else is starting at 7:10. I remember this when I wanted that one job.
So I would assume that's probably to meet some needs, right? So you're saying that they just need to be able to consent to that. If that's going to be the case. Okay.
I think it was like a childcare issue too, for like that, you expected that, oh, this is the job time for high school, but now you're telling me my hours are different.
Do you guys, and I'm not admonishing anybody, but do you guys have any situations where that's varying?
No, the only thing I could think of at high school would be for parent conferences, if they're meeting with parent conferences and things, because teachers, I mean, they go over their contract time all the time to meet for parent conferences, but it's usually the guidance counselor who runs those,
Okay,
but we don't have that.
okay. Well, I think it's one of those things, I mean, we're okay with the language being in there. It needs to be consistent and they need to be okay with it if it's the person that's being impacted, right? Because I imagine there's some times where they're probably making some concessions for some folks that might have some personal things that are either temporary or a little bit longer. But they also need to be make sure they're fair with all the colleagues around them too, because we don't have we have some one guidance counselors, but a lot of times they operate on a team. Any changes in the workday start and end times must be approved by the majority of the entire worksite instructional staff through an anonymous vote. LCEA worksite representative or designee must be present and involved in the vote and vote count. So a few years ago, we moved away from an MOU for every single Wacky Wednesday or different alternative schedule that occurred. And it moved to what's being described essentially in this paragraph. And I think we want make sure that that happens. And I think it's important that you guys are aware and have access to see how what those vote turnouts look like. And to me, that's another one of those issues that falls under when's the decision made? Because if they're not holding leadership committee meetings like they're supposed to, or they have a long-standing alternative schedule for Wednesdays, and they just assume everybody's still on board with it, they need to annually check in and make sure that those things are happening. And I know that Ms. Feltner and I have had some conversations about, what does that look like and how are people managing those Wednesdays? Because I've heard, we could go hardline on it and everybody follows the same thing. And then I've heard, oh no, teachers are gonna, this from other teachers are gonna revolt if y'all take away their ability to do this on Wednesdays because they like the how that structures things for the end of the day for them on Wednesdays or how they're managing it. Most time, if it's a collective voice, they appreciate it. So I just think they need to follow this process and it'll flush out better.
And I will say the only thing that we hear now, of course, is sometimes that new teachers come in, they didn't have a chance to vote because most of the time it seems like they want to do it in May.
Mm-hmm.
So that their schedule is set.
Yeah, we have
to. Year.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, then the other people that come in, they were told, oh, well, Wednesday, you don't have a plan period, or you don't have this, you have one maybe once a month or every 6 weeks, whatever it is that schedule is, if that's what you're on. So therefore, then those teachers, then they have no idea. They're like, oh, well, I didn't vote on this and I didn't. So again, it's just a few of those ones that come back and say that. But if they've had a vote, and again, we put this in here more for the anonymous, because again, it's the idea that, it used to be, you raise your hand and then they know who it is that's doing it. And it's like, no, I mean, because yes, to my administrator, I may say yes, but in reality, no, I really don't want it because I don't get my planning on that day. Because sometimes they'll have a wacky Wednesday, well, then all of a sudden, well, they still meet on Wednesday afternoon too. So then you've lost, that whole day on Wednesday, if by chance it's not your day for wacky Wednesday.
Well, I think we've talked about getting our arms around what's happening with wacky Wednesdays or, intervention and remediation times. Yeah. So, yeah.
What's last?
So I think, I think just making sure there's some consensus. I think, some of it we're not gonna be able to avoid. If you're a brand new teacher, you might not have had the opportunity for input because we have to put the schedules together. They have to make plans. They got to move forward. But there's a retention strategy. They can stay around for a year and then they get to vote on it next year. But we'll try to encourage them. The one thing that comes to mind is encouraging them when they're interviewing new people. Make it a point to let them know what they're getting into. If they're going to have some type of alternative or unconventional schedule, that they share that with the folks that they're hiring, because at the end of the day, they want to keep them. They don't want to hoodwink them or surprise them. So I think their goal is the same, is to hold on to those folks. That gets us in the planning period. Some of this is just, I get it. It's planning period's your biggest priority, probably outside of compensation, right? And some of, I'm sure what you guys are going to provide when we get done with these counter proposals is some feedback. It looks like, I would imagine that's through some of your priorities and survey data in a little bit. But some of it, testing going to occur. We're not going to be able to pay for everybody's interrupted planning when it comes to testing. It's just not realistic and it's not what we can afford. And I just have to be careful because every nickel and dime we put out, it hits you later in your salary. Because if we're steadily just kicking out small dollars, when you times that by 40 schools, that hits the bottom line of what we can bring for salary compensation at some point. So I want to make sure that we're respecting it. And I feel like that's another thing where we need some element of continuity. And that's why, we've got our esteemed guest, Mr. Feltner, here today, so he can hear some of these things, right? Because he pretty much provides the overarching vision and philosophy for instruction in the school district. And he needs to hear you guys' voices and where the problems are. And if there are issues that your school is an anomaly where they're going above and beyond what's can realistically be achieved, as we all strive for, improved instruction for the kids, that we've got ears and on it, and want to listen to it. So, so the planning periods, and even when it gets into how we schedule, the next session was on professional development and meetings. I think there are opportunities for teachers to provide some input on professional development that's going on at the schools. And I know they call them a variety of different types of teams and different things like that. But when it comes down to scheduling IEPs, parent conferences, MTSS, 504, collaborative planning, it's a lot. I get it. It stacks up and it's very time consuming. So we've got to collectively have that commitment to improvement, but at the same time, making sure that what we're trying to improve, we can actually execute. So, I think it's going to be valuable for y'all to provide some feedback on the site-based professional development and what that looks like, whether it's collaborative planning or whether that's through a PLT or in the PLC process, or how that's flushing out and what that's looking like in a day and in a week. So I did not accept the language that's under that, but that doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be more work done in those areas. On the work day, there was some language in that after a third time or after a second time, it used to be upon fifth, and you guys recommended upon the second time, and each time thereafter, within the current school year, that a teacher is required to attend such a meeting, talking about those after school or before school things for 30 minutes. So what I propose is move that fifth to a third as a counter. And I can't take out meeting with the faculty to share concerning emergency and extraordinary situations are excluded from this portion of the agreement, because there are times where we just have to do that, and we can't pay a whole room full of people if they're upon that time, it pushes them over that limit. The planning period, or I'm sorry, I know that you guys have proposed such as athletic ticket taking. We're working to figure out, our ticket taking and athletic events. I still stand on that. They're not fundraisers. I think of fundraisers being like a dance or, things like whatever kind of carnivals or things of that nature. But the overall program that we need to function well for everybody in order for us to collectively do what we need for kids, athletics are involved in that. But if there's absolute times where people are just refuse to take tickets, then I mean, there seem like things that can be worked out at the school levels, and when it's impossible to work those out, then we can facilitate working that out for folks. So that's kind of where we're at as far as ticket taking, and if I know kind of coming into the school year where that's been an issue and where we've had some people that would like to refuse to do that, I can address those, because what I would like, quite honestly, is to be able to pay people out of boosters or some fund to try and cover some of that. Because my non-instructional staff, it seems like a great opportunity for them to make a few extra bucks in the evenings. And I'd love to provide that opportunity, but my principals are going to tell me where's that money going to come from, because they know they think it's going to. But So I know what he's thinking. So that's something we got to continue to figure out and work out.
Just to. Maybe we're on just different pages, but if you're taking, you are collecting funds, which you are collecting and you are raising funds. So it is a fundraiser. It's a fundraiser for the school. Yes, I understand that, but so is a carnival or a dance or anything else that you have. It's still fundraising to go into a particular place. It would help drastically, yes, to be paid. I remember doing it when I first started teaching. You were paid. You were paid out of the money that was collected. Now I know money's not collected. Now it's on the phone and whatever and all that stuff. But so it would have been taking out of whatever monies that was collected that evening. You would take, whatever that was, and you would be paid for that. It's still there. Yes, it would be better to be paid, and I know like sometimes high school teachers, the fact, well, no, I don't want to stay, because if you think about it, when they're done, it'll be as much year later, or next year, but they're done at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and they have to wait till a 6 o'clock game. So what are they doing for those 3 hours type idea?
Mhm.
That was always a difficult thing too.
Mhm.
Especially if you have a child at home and you can't, there's other things happening. I think it would help, especially like I said, if it was a childcare situation or anything else, it would help to be paid, because yes, they would like, just like the night school. I mean, they're getting paid to stay and do those things. So that's where I think a lot of this is the fact that, we do so much anyway as teachers.
Mhm.
And then when we're asked to do something else, but yet we don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of this is.
Okay.
But to us, that is still a fundraiser, because you are still collecting money.
Okay.
It's not like it's a literacy night and you're there because you're doing a literacy night or a math night or parent conference night or whatever it is. There's no funds related into those types of things.
So I would personally, I'd like to take it off teachers' plates altogether. The other idea that I'm looking to execute is, especially now that we've gone to cashless systems, however, we're required to keep some cash on hand. We have to, we found out. Too soon? But to me, that's creating ability for us to use some level 2 volunteers. So that's what I'm looking into. There's some people that disagree with me, but I'm willing to, they can take away my birthday if it doesn't work out. But I want to, because a lot of elementary schools and middle schools, they have ready and willing PTO folks that are half time they're coming anyway and doing those things. So I fully understand where you're coming from, right? What are you working Umatilla and you live in, Claremont, and Brent's making you show up to take tickets. That's not nice of him. So I feel like we can work this issue out, and I know you're tired of hearing about it, right? And I want to find you a solution. So let me think a little bit more on that, on how we can come up with a solid solution. It'd be nice if it just wasn't even necessary to consider. So I'm going to talk that over, because we're doing some things with our gate fees and doing some things that are going to impact our bottom line a little bit, to where, okay, if we can do a combination of compensating some non-instructional folks that are happy to do it. And a lot of times non-instructional people tend to live a little closer to the school. And in conjunction with maybe getting some level 2 volunteers set up, that I think we can just about, other than people that want to do it, get that maybe off of that list. Okay. So I know you guys pretty much struck everything we had done before on planning period. And that goes back into, I want to hear you guys' feedback. So I've left our current structure in the counter proposal. There's some things like, some of the examples that were given last time, and I get it, not all my examples make sense all the time either, but Like, we can't prevent all interruptions. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're in your classroom and you're on your planning period, there's gonna be some interruptions from kids time to time. I do agree that, I know it's just changing language of the individual teacher planning is defined as the period during the workday when teachers can plan for their own classes and students and is self-directed and free from student supervision. If it's your planning period, you shouldn't be required to supervise kids. If there's some weird situations at schools, I mean, I don't know where that flexibility is going to need to come into play. But even if I've got a media specialist that's on the wheel, at some point if they've got some time set aside, they can't constantly be supervising kids. So I don't know how we'll work that out or where the right answer is for that. But I definitely understand it. So if they have a planning period that it doesn't need, it's not a true planning period if you've got student supervision. So the language in about the planning period struck on non-early release days, that's not even possible in the schedule because sometimes periods aren't even 45 minutes on an early release schedule. So that's not even possible on Wednesdays. So it's still left in as 45 minutes, except for on non-early release days there.
Can I, before we go on, just so you know, the idea of the classroom, we took out all classroom teachers when it starts in right after what it said, the free from student supervision. Why we took out the classroom is because sometimes there would be other ones that didn't get, like a media specialist doesn't have, they're not getting a planning period, or a guidance counselor not getting a classroom, and that's why the classroom was taken, because thinking that it would just be the teachers need a plan period. Even if a media, okay, yeah, I understand, and I'm only taking a half hour instead of the 40 minutes, that, that's up to them, but they still need something that they have a plan period of some kind. We also had the issue, of course, they trying to deal with it, but we also had the issue with the VBK teachers of not always having that, the supervision of not having, because, okay, well, you have your plan period, but it's when the kids are all napping. So they're not always receiving something, but a lot of times the guidance and the coaches and media and those type people may not receive something because it's not as easy and they're always busy all day long because they have students and they have whatever.
Well, I think I definitely understand the VPK, right? If you're teaching a VPK classroom, they need to make accommodations at the school for you to have a planning period. I'm not sure I can get on board with guidance counselors, lit coaches, and some of these other situations, because if their responsibilities and there's freedoms in their schedules, and a lot of what they're doing is planning. It's a different kind of work, right? So that I struggle with a little bit, but we definitely need to figure out where pre-K teachers are not getting planning, and that needs to be addressed. And I get it, they're small, especially getting in pre-K ESE. It's hard to try to manage some of those, but we've got to figure out a way because they're still teaching and they still need, they're teaching, they're grading, they're planning, and they need the ability to do that. So all the language about the 1 planning period, 2 planning period, 3 planning period, in my mind, I wish there'd be a perfect world where we could pull subcoverage just out of that language altogether, right? And come up with an affordable solution. So that way that's not considered in the whole interruption there. It's just something that people can do for additional compensation. But the problems I'm running into, it goes back to budget, because if I've got 6 periods I've got to cover, say at a high school, and I'm paying each one of those folks an extra $33, I've just about doubled what I have budget to pay for a sub. So it's if I'm paying, that many teachers on their planning period to cover a class period, and then it's for multiple days in a row when we run into tough circumstances, it just implodes on us as far as what we have budget to cover. So I know there's got to be an answer on how we figure out for when people provide sub-coverage or absorb classes, but I have not arrived at what that answer is yet. So I'm hoping that hearing you guys' feedback and some different things and perspectives on that day will help us move toward figuring out what some solutions are for that. So it's not that I totally disagree with the work you guys did on the emergency sub coverage section, because I feel like it needs to be a section. And I do feel like volunteers need to be solicited first. I feel like there needs to be a good rotation that is tailored to the school and established through the leadership committee on what's realistic. Because I know that I know the teachers that are going to participate on these leadership committees, they know what the school needs. They know what's impossible and possible for certain instructional roles on the campus. If it's not possible for them to be part of some rotation, I know they're realistic when it gets down to the school level. So a lot of what you guys mentioned in that emergency sub coverage, I agree with. I can't figure out how all that works yet. And then it goes right, all the stuff with the different meetings that we have to have, whether it's IEP, DA, or state testing. I mean, some of those things, as you know, are just all hands on deck, and it's got to happen. And it's become weirder now that we have PM1, PM2, PM3. It's not even where they just, it block disrupts. It was easier a little bit, I almost think, when it block disrupt the whole last month of school, month and a half, because then everybody was kind of understood it was unconventional. But when you got PM1, PM2, PM3, and trying to get all that done in a window, which hopefully those windows have become more and more compressed, I think we're still adapting to what, okay, how's that look? And are we able to do some things that make sense to manage those schedules? Every teacher should have a duty-free time for lunch. I think we can't remove some of that responsibility of elementary school teachers on getting the little guys there. And I think it's a matter of working with the schools to make sure that, okay, it's okay to bring your kids as early as you need to, in order to make sure that you're still getting your allotted time for a duty-free lunch. On the student early release, I agree with some of that language and with some editing. You guys proposed on weeks where there is a holiday or non-student day, making the work week 4 days instead of 5. The early release Wednesday will be used for individual self-directed planning. I put in here on weeks where there is a paid holiday or a non-work day, making it a 4-day work week instead of 5. The early release Wednesday will be used for individual self-directed planning. So some of my principals might not like that, but I think it's a fair concession. That if it is a short week, you're taking away some time there and acting like it's a full week, and it's probably not intentional. But at the same time, if it's non-student day, that means you got a whole extra day in there. Even if we only use half of it, there's extra time built in there anyway. So that's why I altered that bit. And then altered the language a little bit on what you guys did on the leaving during work hours. Ultimately, we have to have approval for that, but you guys put a teacher may leave their assigned work site during work hours with permission of the building principal or designated representative. I know you're trying to convert it to a positive. I just pretty much the same thing, but I put a teacher may only leave their assigned work site during work hours with permission of the building principal. So I know it's a lot, and they're our favorite articles, so if y'all are around in. So Lincoln Park, I have, if you, I know it's on the agenda, if you guys wanna kind of push that to the end, because I've just got some kind of updates, because that's still evolving. Just tell you how many allocations are there, what the shifts are for being proposed to look like. But that's still being defined as enrollment continues to grow. So before it's all said and done, we'll have an MOU that guides that, but it's still evolving. And as people come back off of their breaks, or coming back 4th of July, everybody piles back in. After that, piles back in for us, so we'll be able to get some clarity. So I don't know, do you guys want to take a break? It's 11:36 now. And then is it okay if we roll into y'all's next section, which is your priorities and survey data and stuff? So do you want to take break and caucus, or just a break altogether? Okay, so we'll call it caucus. Okay. Is that back room still open? Okay.
Yeah, so-
All right. Okay, it's 11:36, 7:10:24. We are breaking for caucus. Yeah. Okay, we're back from caucus. It's 12:17 on 7:10:24.
All right, so, Kathy had to leave for her appointment, so, we have me and Val Smith. And kind of tag team here. Our next agenda item on the agenda was our bargaining priorities and survey data. We did do a very short synopsis of that at the school board meeting. And gave every school board member a copy, and then this morning I did make sure that I sent an electronic copy, so Chad, you have an electronic copy.
Okay.
Superintendent does, as well as all the school board members.
Okay.
We have decided in our caucus, just because of the number of articles and sections that were removed from our proposal in your calendar, that we would really like to take some time to digest it all, because obviously in a caucus, the short caucus, and we have not enough time. And then be able to come back with our findings from the survey data to support some of the reasoning why we proposed those initial pieces. So we believe that will take up a lot of time, and we would like to try to get through the agenda today, as opposed to spending almost the rest of our time just on like presenting our survey data.
Okay.
That was on 11. So if it's okay, we would like to push that to tomorrow, so number 4 on the agenda to tomorrow. And instead move on to agenda item number 5.
Okay.
And do our counter proposal for compensation.
Sounds good.
Val, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, there's significant conversation to be had, I think, just, the proposal that came originally, was based on the survey feedback. And so, it makes sense for us to be able to present that feedback when meeting council.
Well, and I think what's important is rather than just a counter being an elimination of language, some alternatives and solutions is what we're seeking. And then we can work back and forth from there a little bit.
So what's being passed out now is our compensation counter. And I know how challenging it is to read and digest, so I'm gonna give y'all a minute while she's passing that out before we talk about it. And we will have Patrick Kelly presenting his compensation data whiz.
So our counter proposal was, initial district proposal was the 2,400. We did have that subcommittee looking at percent raises versus flat amounts. After that, we did look at the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the flat amount for this year. I think maybe in the future, once there's not much compression with the minimum salaries with better educators, percents might be more effective, but I think at least for this year, because of the compression, flat amounts is a better way to go. So we're proposing a $3,000 increase for the performance pay highly effective, And then following the same exact distribution based on the law, performance for either grandfather or sorry, effective for performance or grandfather would be 2250. And then grandfather highly effective would be 2400. When I cost it out using the information that you provided, that would give a total general fund increase of 7.2 million, which would be 1.4 million more than the initial general fund increase for the 2400. And we think based on the data we kind of talked about last time of how much is being spent of the district budget for salaries compared to how much was actually budgeted, that there's some flexibility in there.
And we'll take this back, also cost out, and do some verification on numbers, and then go from there, and just kind of reiterating where those original numbers came from, were based on the increases. We try to stay in line with the percentage as close as we can, but add as much more as we can on what the additional percentages they provide from the state are. So, but we'll take it back, take it under consideration, and make sure it's conveyed to all the proper parties that it's under consideration.
You also want to share that our committee was really cognizant of this concept of trying to look at the percent versus the flat rate. We spent a lot of
Yep.
time sitting down as a subcommittee with the district and helping us hash out those numbers and going through quite an extensive presentation, right? Where we were really trying to work together to find a solution for our experienced folks in the performance pay. And so we are still committed, and I think through our bargaining priorities that you'll see, like that is a huge priority for our folks to find a way, get more money to the folks that have been kind of left behind with the compression issues. So we are not forgetting that piece, and we're continuing to try to find what is the best way to help address some of those concerns.
And that's why I wanted to make sure that both of our audiences that are interested do understand the due diligence that you guys put forth in exploring the option, because you hear about what other districts do, and you wonder if once they committed to that road, did they thoroughly inspect it as much and actually get really granular and see how sometimes that was hurting some of their more seasoned people also. So I appreciate the work that went on in those subcommittees also. So we'll continue to bargain.
So are we good to move on to the next agenda?
Yes.
So the next item, we are at some supplemental proposals. So the first supplemental proposal, I think we want to do the retention. Again, I'm gonna give you all time to get the paper and take a look at it before we start having the conversation, and we'll then share some of our thoughts here. like us to read through some of it.
Give me
We
just
just
a
wanna
second.
give you all time and then we can explain.
Yeah, just
Yeah. Okay. I have a question on bullet 3 on the bullet 3 on the examples. You have in parentheses 5 outside of the district, 20 consecutive with LCS equals 25, then you say will receive a supplement of 1,500, then in parentheses 25.
That's like,
Okay, that's what I thought. Like, the math was not adding there.
yes.
so that 1,500 is supposed to be 2,500.
Supposed to be 2,500.
Okay.
So this proposal was modeled after Seminole County language that they have. Did we change some of the years? One thing we want to look at is rewarding teachers that stay with Lake County. But also recognizing some level of outside experience, when they come in. So we kind of, as a committee, looked at 5 years of outside experience to kind of reward. We also looked at, payout obviously, can be up for discussion. Psychologically, people like sometimes to see bigger chunks than small drips throughout the year. So that's where I looked at basically half in December, half at the end of the year. So it's more like, look, you stayed for this point, here's half of it, you stayed this point, here's the other half of it versus, oh, it's only $10 a paycheck or whatever it would be. Sometimes that kind of gets lost. So if we're looking at not the payout would not start until you have 5 consecutive years of experience within Lake County.
I think part of it makes it truly a retention supplement, right? The way you're talking.
Because we know, like, 0 to 3, 0 to 4, there's lots of people that will lose during that, so if you're here for 5 with Lake County, this is what you have to look forward to, kind of idea.
Did y'all, in talking with, Seminole, do you know what they used as a funding source? They didn't.
It was not mentioned.
Okay.
Did you cost that out?
So when there was a confusion with like these spreadsheets, because when I looked at total years in district and then outside of district. But the outside district didn't seem like it actually corresponded, because it was like teacher had 44 years of in-district experience, but so they got hired in 2018.
Well, the employee start date is their contractual start date as a teacher. So,
But then there was another person that said they just transferred with 19 years of experience last year from Seminole, and like I could not find them, like 19 within our committee, so.
Okay.
So what I did was I looked at the total years of experience in districts. I started at like just 4 to the maximum and multiplied that by 100, and that was 242,000. Based on that, same as the 4th year person, assuming they kind of come back for the 5th year. For that part.
yeah, it's,
So when you say Lake County experience, so if they have some Orange County sandwiched in between, you're encompassing
years.
all consecutive years?
so this is based only on consecutive years.
You're not eligible until you reach 5 consecutive years. of
Okay,
Lake County
without a break in service.
Without a break in service. So yeah, if you're gonna jump to Orange County to grab that and jump back, well, that 5-year clock restarts.
Okay,
If you want to reward, like, you're sticking with Lake County School.
okay.
You're also rewarding some outside experience with that up to 5-year part.
Roughly around 250.
Yeah.
June quarter, okay,
Based on
that's what you.
very rough estimates.
Gotcha.
And just to share a little bit of the bargaining survey data and like where this is coming from. Our general survey data, which is sent out to anybody and everybody within the bargaining unit that's instructional to complete, and we have over 1,000 responses total on all of our surveys. Over 60% said that retention and recruitment is a top issue on the Lake County School District plan. So we know this is a hot button issue. We know compensation is one of the top things that people say over and over again. Over 72% of our responses mention salary concerns and mention, in particular, experience salary concerns. And so that's kind of where this is coming from, that we want to find a way to retain our great teachers here in Lake County and reward them for their years of service. And so that's kind of where this is coming.
Okay. All right.
No, just to, I don't wanna keep repeating myself, but I wanna make sure I understand it in my head. In order to qualify for this bonus, they must be at least with us 5 years.
5 consecutive.
So if I have a teacher that worked they're on their third year with us, they don't qualify.
Correct, we're not qualifying until getting to the 5-year mark.
Okay,
That's why when I crossed, I literally took it from 4 to the top level. I didn't include this 1 and 3 people with the rest.
I'll go to the higher data and I looked at their experience and their higher data contractually, and I can cost it out.
And just to share, I know y'all look at this data, when we look at the data that was on the website about retention,
Mhm.
it seemed to be like by year 3. Like 0 to 3 years is when folks are leaving. And so you're seeing like for 2022, 2023, 57% of the folks that left were 0 to 3 years. And then 23, 24, so far the data that's been released on the website that I saw as of March, 56% of them were 0 to 3 years. So we know at least the 3-year mark is a problem for us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why we were like trying to go near 3 years with the 5-year mark.
I think that's been a consistent number for a lot of districts, right? It's that survivor number. I agree.
And we have that window that we don't update the data because contractually they have to September 15th to gain employment, and some do.
Right.
And that's when we do, after that day, we update the data to finalize it. Okay. Moving on.
Okay.
Are you ready to? do the
Yeah.
next thing? Okay, so our next item is, again, is within agenda item number 6, supplemental proposals. We have a junior ROTC proposal. We have the plain wording that would actually go on the contract, and then we have some supplemental pieces that kind of explain the rationale. So you'll receive both of those.
Okay.
Before we dive into the details, though, we did have a question we want to get addressed and answered and get some clarification about how the junior ROTC instructors are compensated. Because there's some confusion about whether or not they're receiving the salary performance pay increases or not. So could y'all explain if they are receiving those or they aren't, and what your understanding is of that?
Okay. You can easily look at them or something, look at them or something too. I think we'll have to look.
And I do have, staff sergeants.
Staff sergeant.
They're usually compensated.
Hudson is gonna present the proposal. So I'll give you a minute.
They don't qualify. We don't, can know it's all.
So we'll have to historically look at some of it, but I can tell you their compensation is a lot different.
That's a lot different, so they don't get the performance pay.
But if you look at their numbers, they're pretty significant numbers.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, you'll see in a minute the supplemental information to support the proposal that you're getting now. There are 2 pieces here. One is the supplement, and the second piece is understanding their salary increases. So that's why I asked about that. So you'll see that shortly, and I believe he will also address it. When you're ready, you can go.
Are we gonna get this as well?
Yeah, we're doing it right now.
did, 2 weeks. We did a week at Warmless Camp, where I'm there 24 hours a day, for, a whole week. Free. Exact same thing. With different.
So these are just Lake County cadets or?
We had Lake County, we had Seminole, we had, it's whatever schools show up. But if their school is showing up, their instructors are showing up as well.
Okay.
So each of us are assigned to supervise our cadets or a cadet in the mix.
And there's no compensation for that additional time?
No, now, you guys are providing the 11-month contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but we're also talking about, the trip that just went to Washington DC. I also have another, leadership camp that's going to start before school starts. And that's for all the 8th graders that are coming up. This is just my program. Right now, for example, we use Mount Dora. Mount Dora High School cleared over 8,000 community service hours last year, above and beyond school days. At 8,000. If we want to receive that recognition, besides the clubs, in addition to the clubs, we have to provide 12 hours of community service per cadet. So for example, last year, my school had 164 cadets. So I had to do that times 12 hours for each if I'm going to receive with merit. If not, I'm not even eligible. Okay, so we have to be weekends after school, through the summer, if we're going to be even remotely competitive that way. I went last year alone 68 days straight without a day off work. And then they had a 2-week break, and then I went another 24 days that I worked without a day off. And you will not hear one of us complain about it, because we know if I'm going to be competitive, this is what I've signed up for. We're just asking for something that's going to compensate this additional time, and we have provided. We use Mount Dora as the example, because actually it was Major Scott who started the proposal from Mount Dora. But they itemized out everything that they've done. And we have to do this each year. So every school, we load every event that we do into a system and track it, because we have to report it to the airport to verify that. So we need this rating for the schools. So all of us are tracking individually.
So whenever you achieve that rating, so what does that entail? What happens after that?
At that
Is there a
rating,
benefit to the school or?
It's mostly about bragging rights.
Yeah.
But also the cadets get awards. They
Okay.
get ribbons. It also helps us, like Mount Dora had the #1 junior ROTC cadet in the world this year. Okay, we just had a cadet get the Gold Valor Award, which is the highest award possible. They risked their life to save another, ran into a burning building. We've had, this last year, we cleared over $100,000 in scholarships just in my school, just through my program. Mount Dora does it, Eustis does it. We got kids going to college left and right on full ride scholarships. And that's through these programs. If we don't do this, it doesn't qualify those cadets for that. So even though it's not in the normal service hours, if I'm going to do right by the kids who volunteered to wear that uniform once a week and follow our rules, then I need to do this for them, right? So we're just asking that first priority is to give a $3,000 supplement for that time that we're actually working. That's not contracted time. It's an additional responsibility that has been given to us by each branch of the military if we want to receive those awards.
So that was going to be my other question, and I'm trying not to interrupt you as much as possible. So no matter what branch is represented at the school, it all falls under these same.
Each branch provides their own requirements, but
Okay.
they're all very similar.
But the cadet camp, for instance, would there be Navy cadets and Air Force cadets there? Okay.
Yeah, and in Lake County, we have Navy, Air Force, and Army.
Yeah.
but the Navy program is ran by the Marines.
Okay.
I don't know why. So, and it's a congressionally mandated program
Okay.
that we're covered. So, you know, you guys know that the military branch, whichever branch it is, provides half of the pay. And that's because they provide half of our work requirements. So when we're doing our prep time, I'm doing what, for me, the Air Force tells me I have to do additionally. Through curriculum, for reporting, for all this paperwork I have to do. Through the PD that's required, since our accreditation is national accreditation, I gotta do PD through them. And to keep up my certification. So all of this, that's their end of the pay. You know, everything else they're trying to get me to do every day. So we have to do that. And all we're asking for at that first piece, and like I said, we provided step-by-step justification. The $3,000 something, that's what we're asking. And that's, if you look, every parade, you're gonna see an RTC unit in it. Every time if there's lighting of wreaths at one of the, we're there. At every American Legion event, we're there. If somebody asks us, we do that because, like, just this last week, I spent extra time serving breakfast to veterans at the American Legion, and because of that, they gave me two $2,000 scholarships for seniors that just graduated, which we handed out one last week and one this week will be coming out. That's what we're asking this money for. And priority 2 is all these things that you talk about with compensations for like ratings and retention and that doesn't come into us. Our pay has recently changed. Through the memorandum of agreement, up through last year, we have what's called MIP, minimum instructor pay. Now that's what every school, when they sign with whatever branch they're at, they say, we will give you this. You agree that this is going to be what the pay is at a minimum, but there is wording in it that says you're highly encouraged to go above and beyond. Okay, that's because the pay was set up by rank. Whatever rank we retired at after 20+ years of service, that was the establishment of the pay. That's no longer the case. Now they have a thing called J6, where if you retired enlisted, that's your pay. If you retired an officer, that's your pay, regardless of rank. And if I had to go to that pay now, I would lose about $7,000 to $8,000 a year. All right, I'm grandfathered because I'm starting my 14th year, 15th year teaching. I retired in 2011, so started my 14th year. Right, but people who start now, they have to go to this J6. It's just a standardized pay, and again, the requirement to get that is you have to have done 20+ years in the military to even start there. You walk in the door. We don't receive a lot of pay increases. There is usually I think 1% to 2% pay increase a year, but that's not keeping up with the cost of living. When you talk about how the stuff is compensated, we're asking for priority 2, just that if you give a bonus because I received highly effective this year, we would like to receive that. That's, you know, we're doing it for every other instructional teacher. We're saying if you give a retention bonus because we've been in Lake County for 5 years, 8 years, whatever, then we should receive that as well. Because we are teachers, we do the same duties. I watch the hallways, I do traffic in the mornings, I do after school clubs. I'm doing color guard at every game. So we're just asking for those same benefits. If you're going to do for any other teacher, they're asking for the same compensation.
Do you know how much the new JSIPS amount is?
They're actually paying by degree,
Okay.
but I don't know exactly off the top of my head. I know that if I had a doctorate degree right now, I would still lose about $3,000.
Yes.
And that's a problem for us. For example, Eustis just got hired. They've been almost 2 years, they've been 2 years empty. And couldn't get anybody to come in.
Hmm.
Couldn't get anybody to apply. Finally got a guy who agreed. And I had a guy, I had two that had come in and said, hey, we'd like to apply. And one of them, as soon as you looked at what we were offering, and I said, no, we don't have any supplements here. We have an 11-month, but you know, he took a job at the Department of Transportation instead. The next guy took a job out at Lake Brantley doing the exact same job, or Dr. Phillips. Because they offer supplements and you have paid the exact same job, but it's a 10-month contract instead of 11. But he would be making more money there because they offer supplements. We would love for Lake County to be a destination district. We want people to want to come here. Right now, in high school, we have the job opening. We've been advertising for a year, and the people that we want to do it for, they're taking jobs elsewhere. And, you know, there's no need for that. Leesburg High School is my third school teaching, and I'm not leaving. It's a great school. All right. I need to get people in the door to let them see it. They're not walking in the door. That's the reason we're coming to do this.
Okay. Well, and I've heard different things, so I appreciate you coming.
Yes.
First of all, I appreciate your service and all you do, both prior and in our community now. So we'll carry this consideration forward, and I appreciate you guys.
The other thing that I wanted you to consider on here real quickly is the fact that up until last year, you gave us an 11-month contract. That extra month came completely out of Lake County. Now, if you gave us a 12-month contract, the Air Force would reimburse the whole thing. So last year, they would only reimburse up to 10 months, period. Now they'll reimburse all the way up to 12. So in theory, you keep the 11-month program, they will now reimburse you more. So what you're coming out of pocket less, they're going to give you that extra money that basically we're asking for. And the way that we figured it, because we're only asking for 3, the county's still going to make money.
Now you say Air Force, does the other branches offer the
The other
same?
branches have done the same thing.
They reimburse up to 12
Up
months?
to 12 months now. So Lake County will make money. Even if they reimburse us here, you're gonna get paid more.
That helps, because that's what some of my questions, because I knew
Where's
that
the money
too.
coming from?
Well, I knew that was occurring, but I just didn't know it was across every branch of, it sounds like for the most part, I guess because it comes congressional, it's all consistent across every branch.
Congress made a bunch of changes because right now, just Air Force, we're over 280 instructors short. Worldwide, and Army's worse, Navy's worse. Everybody's hurting, because compensation packages have not been competitive with the big sector. So. Really good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For the 11,
Yeah.
There's the ability to move over 13 right now, once we get all of it. Right now.
They not have 9, but that's because of
Right,
vacancies.
so you have 9, so we have 11, then, so if we currently have 9 instructors, and I know that we have two positions that.
Just got hired?
One just got hired and the other one's still open.
Okay, that's what because I'm looking at active.
Right,
So,
so yeah, you got the chief at Eustis who's gonna start next year.
okay,
There's your 10, and then we got the open spot that's advertised at Leesburg.
so that would be the
Year
11.
11, yeah.
So I'm 6. I was just looking at actual people. Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
thank you.
I would also ask how I got your attention.
Yeah.
I mean, just target opportunity. If you guys need us for anything, community service, you want a color guard somewhere, you want somebody to do something, you want us to come to a building cleanup. All units have been contacted and all said, yay, verily, we'll be there.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
My new position, I might have some ideas.
I do want to make sure I say out loud to because some of our committee members have asked that I point out that the union schools are actually recognizing them out for our cadets or achievements, and we have so many great programs including at Leesburg High, and so I think the hard work that they're doing and what they're doing for our kids is really positive. And speaking of powerful groups that are doing hard work, we have another supplemental proposal.
Okay.
So this will be from our SLPs,
Okay.
speech language pathologists. I'm going to have pass around their proposal, and then we also have supporting information. They have a presentation that they put together, very similar to what the junior RP folks have.
I know some of my folks might have to have a hard stop at 1, so if anybody has to leave at 1, it's fine. It's not. We're getting close to there.
Thank you. I know that $2,000.
Does that include all of them?
So once you have time to digest, you have Aaron, you've been sitting and for calling and do it for that.
Okay. We can go ahead and proceed.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to it today. I'll try to keep it short, but there's a lot of numbers that I wanted to share. The first slide of the pie chart is showing how many therapists we have currently that are the percentage of therapists we have on the contract. We're currently at 40% contracted SLPs. Our actual numbers are 69 total, 6 are charter, 38 are direct hire, and 25 are contract. If you go to the next part, this is our number. These are our actual companies that we're using right now. Some of them just had a huge increase in what they're asking for. You can see the first one, community rehab, we have 11 therapists that are contracted from them, and they are costing $113,000 each, which comes out to $1.2 million. When you take the total of the 25 SLPs that are contract, that's costing us $2.6 million. Some of these raise over $30,000 or at 29, almost $30,000 from what they were costing us last year. The next page shows what our direct hires are making versus what our contract SLPs are making. The contract companies are offering anywhere from $53 to $66 an hour, depending on if you have a W-2 or you do a 1099. They are offering benefits. Some of the insurance is actually less than ours. I had that on the chart, but I wanted to condense it some. But you can see that they're making anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 a year more than we are in salary.
The next chart, I compared some of the districts around us. Osceola, a couple of years ago, gave a very large raise to their SLPs, and they are currently at 0 contract SLPs. Sarasota at 62.5, only has 8, Collier at 63.18. Marion is at 57 and they have 72, which would be devastating if we had to pay that many contract SLPs. You know, just in talking to some of our contract SLPs, they would really like to be direct hire, but they just can't say no to these amounts. And I can't say that I blame them. But we asked them, you know, what would it take to get you to come back? And I didn't talk to all of them, but nearly half said if we could get to $45 an hour, we would come back to the district. And that's how we got our number. So that is our proposal on the next slide. We're proposing a $10,000 supplement to try to get these folks to come back. You know, if we're paying $100,000 for a contract, it will eventually save us money. I know it's a big ask, but if we're not gonna get people to come back, you know, it's not really worth asking for anything. We hope we can get people to come back to direct hire. And if you look at the last one, I know in the past it's always been, well, you're making about the same with your benefits, but we looked at our benefits, they're worth about $20,000. And we would still. So we added that number in there. We're costing you about $85,000 per person if we were taking benefits. Like I myself, I'm part-time. I have like $8,000 in benefits. I don't use the full 20. I know many don't use the health insurance. But we would save you, if everyone were taking the benefits, it would save you almost $20,000 if you were investing in your direct hires at a higher rate rather than using the contract companies. I appreciate you looking at it. I hope we can figure out a solution. It's a very expensive problem. It's hard when you get phone calls and texts and emails, you know, not being tempted to go. My kids have gone to school here. I've worked for you guys for 14 years. I don't want to not be loyal. I don't want to be a contractor, but you know, it's very tempting. Do you have any questions?
Actually, if I could add one thing, just, the one thing that's really important to remember is that by direct hire staying and working year to year, that gives the students the opportunity to have consistency with their therapy, which benefits them with improving at a faster rate versus a new contract person coming in. They don't know what therapy services have already been attempted. And so they're either going to be reduplicating what's already been tried and what's found to not be the most beneficial, or students that are getting so close to dismissal, someone new coming in, they're going to be starting at square one again. And so the student will be in services for longer than they might actually. So it really benefits the students to have that consistent staff.
So when we went down this road in the past and wound up with the C's stipend, not everybody had their C's. And there were a couple grandfather or whatever, but so when it comes to the SLP Department of Health license, is that 100% of the people that have those?
That are direct hire that have the Department of Health license. We have 4 bachelor's level SLPs that cannot have, well, they could be an SLPA, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 34, I believe.
Okay.
And I believe all of our contract SLPs have their license. So if they were to come back, they would then be in that number, but I would obviously be saving us a number.
And that prevents them from having to have the teaching going the FLDOE route, right?
I have both.
Yeah, both.
You can have both.
Like, I worked with my bachelor's degree and I had to have it, and then I had 2 years to get into a master's program. And I just kept it because I didn't get SeaWorld for free. Like, there's perks sometimes, but I don't know why I haven't let it go. But you could work with your Department of Education, but most of us have our licenses because it allows us to work in other settings.
So. And I'm just wondering how were y'all able to get the numbers for the contract salaries, what their salaries were?
I mean, I've been approached, they've given me numbers, I've asked other, you're saying what they're being paid, I mean, I have flyers, they contact me all the time.
Okay, all right, that's why I was just wondering where the source of, because what, they give us the bottom line with administrative fees tacked onto it, and that's been our curiosity. All right, how do we figure out what the gap is?
Yeah, and I think that if we do this raise, we need to advertise it. I think they must go through the Department of Health and find all the SLPs in the area, and they just send out
I'm sure.
a mass text. We have openings in Lake County schools. But it's, it's hard when you're making $37 an hour to see that you could be making 60.
Also, in terms of funding, I know that on the most recent, I think, 2 meetings ago, that there's like 1.4 million of IDA funds that were set aside for contractors. So I don't know if the IDA funds, if you're saying that for contractors, if some of that could be even refunded for the supplement for the direct hire instead of the general funds. If you're paying it for the contractors, then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay it for the direct
And a lot
hire.
of that is, and when we approve those amounts, that could be a not to exceed amount, right? That doesn't mean that we fully expend the 1 point, whatever it was,
Well,
$1
you're
million.
at 2.6 million right now for 25 SLPs who are contract. I mean, it's expensive.
So the community rehab with 11, their hourly rate or their administrative fee is 85. Do you know what the actual SLP gets paid hourly to them?
The contract SLP, community rehab. I have it on the chart. Community rehab, they have different options. If you're gonna use medical insurance, you make 53 an hour. If you're going to not use medical insurance oh, I'm sorry, I cut off the top. That chart that says direct hire versus contract. Sorry about that, hold on, go to it. The first category is Lake County schools, it's the first 2 in orange. The second 3 are academic staffing, that's the company. And then the last 2 are community rehab associates. That's the one that we have 11 of the community rehab associates.
Academic associates is the first.
Academic staffing is the first 3. I don't know if it looks purple on yours, it's purple on mine, but I think I cut off the top.
So you're looking at this one, this table.
Yeah,
The first 2 are late.
the first 2 is.
Are Lake County.
And then the 3.
Are academic staffing,
Staffing, they offer 3 options.
and the last 2 is community rehab.
Rehab associates.
So community rehab 85, so there actually is 53. Contract with no medical 56.
Yeah, and then when you look at the column that says district pays company, that's what we are paying them. We're paying them 80, and then they're coming back and paying their SLPs either 58, 60, or 60.
What's their retirement benefit?
They have a 401k, they do a 2% match,
2%
but
match.
I think people are to the point that it doesn't matter because they're seeing the amount of money they can make and they'll just invest that in their 401k themselves. I talked to my retirement advisor and he said, Aaron, I would do it. And he's looking at this all day long.
So saying we find a good spot with money and we feel like it's enough to try and leverage folks back into the district. What other benefits do you feel like, I mean, I know what the general benefits of what we offer to any instructional employee are. What do you feel like as now that it's pushed so far to the limit, I get it, right? You've had to consider it, but before it really got to this point, what's kept you from making that difference?
I think what's kept me is I love my school. I work with the deaf and hard of hearing kids at Astatula, and that's where I want to be. I'm scared if I leave, I can't go back to my school. I think that keeps some here. I think people really want to be in FRS.
the money is just too good to stay direct hire, that they'll just invest in a 401k. I think the $10,000 supplement would bring people back. You know, I have one she says, I know I need to come back eventually because I want to get my pension. She's like, I'm just waiting for them to offer more money. I have young kids, this is too good, you know, I can't. I had another SLP, I thought we were gonna get to come back. I believe they just changed the non-compete clause.
That was my last question was, what is the non-compete?
It's like in the legislature goes back and forth, but, and I think some are getting wise and they're not saying they'll do a non-compete. So it may take a year to get some of these people back because they may have to, you know, get out of their clause. But I believe the law is saying that you can no longer have a non-compete, but I hear they're going back and forth about it. Yeah.
Well,
But I think there are some that come back right away if this were to work out.
that puts us competitive with graduates too, I would imagine. Cause I know it is competitive to get into the master's programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we could also advertise to colleges, you know, to the communicative disorder program. But we all talk, we have a group called Florida SLPs for appropriate compensation. If our number goes up, we have a chart with the whole state of Florida, they're gonna know what Lake County pays.
Gotcha.
So. Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing it forward. Got some homework to do.
Brad, I know you said a hard stop about one procedure code.
Yeah, I think we're probably about there, and it probably would benefit us more to probably get to work on some stuff, just like you guys were saying, you need some time for discussion. And I'm wondering, so topics of agenda tomorrow, because we have it lined out. What did you guys have in mind for topics you wanted?
Well, I think if our group agrees, it might be appropriate to start with the bargaining priorities
Okay.
and the survey data, and then we can discuss.
We do have one more supplement for social workers.
Oh, yes,
And that's
I'm sorry.
later today, social workers here today.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's
So
fine.
probably the first thing to start tomorrow is.
Yes.
we can have some social workers.
Okay.
Proposal.
Okay.
So there's one more money thing.
Okay.
Yes, so we'll finalize that and get that ready for the first thing tomorrow for our social workers. And then we can go into the bargaining priorities and survey data to support Article 10 and 11.
Okay.
So Article 10.
Okay. And with so much additional compensation that's coming to the forefront, I mean, you know, it's going to require obviously going back and some executive sessions and some, as it was pointed out by the board the other night, they're ready to hit executive session.
We tried costing everything out too.
No, I appreciate it.
it.
No, I appreciate it.
If you do look at what I proposed for social workers, like total ask, based on what estimates for everything that we asked for today, would be 2.1 million above. 2.1 million above the general fund increase. So that includes the compensation proposal, ROTC proposal, SLP proposal, and the social worker proposal tomorrow. So that's like our kind of top number we ask is 2.1 million above the current offer.
Okay.
And then after doing Article 10 and 11 tomorrow, is there anything else? I guess the MOUs, if we need to finalize some MOUs.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and nail down some of the Lincoln Park stuff this afternoon, see if I can get a hold of the people I need to get at least get as close. I'm still not sure I've got a level of comfort where we might have to revisit it, even if we sign off on just the basics. And which are kind of the work hours. There's some things like it's a really truly non-traditional situation where you got two shifts, they overlap a little bit in the middle, and then the student contact hours on Friday are very limited. It's more like an office hour type and and they all come at the same time on Friday. So it's tough because it's not as easy as saying, oh, this and this, and they'll follow the rest of the contract. It's just really intricate. So I think night school MOU, there wasn't much change there. We can bring that forward. We have we still have like critical shortage and things that need to be discussed, but I don't think there's much beyond that though. So we can kind of just add MOUs to the end of it and go from there.
And then depending upon where we get, we can decide if we need to set some date for the following week.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to keep setting dates and keep chugging along, and get as much done as we can. Heading into the school year. I just need to, really, some of it is gonna be when I can get my executive session scheduled. Okay. So does that conclude us for today? You
I
think?
think so.
Okay. All right, that concludes today's bargaining session. It's 1:13 on 17/24.